All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Balancing Humor and Tragedy with writehive. We're going to talk about introducing humorous elements and tragic scenes in our writing and how to balance the two so it doesn't seem out of place or inappropriate. I'm Lori B. Duff. I am your moderator today. Our amazing panelists are Rebecca Mix, the New York Times and indie bestselling author of weird magical books like The Ones We Burn, The Boss Heart's Promise duology, and Neopets, The Omelet Fairy, as well as the upcoming I Killed the King duology and Milo and the Monstrous Betwixt duology. She was a reluctant reader at first, and she fell in love with stories after joining a reading contest to spite her fourth grade nemesis. I always find spite to be the best of motivators. Rebecca lives in Southeast Michigan. If you can't find her, she's probably on a long walk, talking to bugs in her garden, or attempting to brew the perfect cup of jasmine tea. And then we have Ryan C. Bradley. He's a musician, podcaster, and the author of Saints Blood, Bad Connections, Horror Stories, and co-author of Dumb Bullshit for Brilliant Idiots, which might be the best title ever. His short fiction has appeared in No Sleep, Tales to Terrify, and Dark Moon Digest, among other places. He co-hosts Horror Hangover with Cass Clark, and you can learn more about him at ryancbradley.com. S. Morgan Burbank is a writer whose works focus on the topics of mental health, sexuality, love, and relationships told through the lens of varying genres. Their debut novel, Kotov Syndrome, was the 2021 Queer Indie Awards winner for Best Dystopian Novel, while its much-awaited sequel, Woodpusher, was released in January 2024. They also write visual novels under the name M.J. Lamott. Welcome, Morgan. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll do our best to get them answered for you. All right, so balancing humor and tragedy. Why do those things need to be balanced? Why is it important to strike a balance between humor and tragedy? Let's start with Morgan.
So, I think at a very deep level, a lot of people who write humor in any capacity will tell you that a lot of their humor comes from, trauma, tragedy of their own, be that in their childhood, be that in their life, whatever it may be. And I would certainly argue I'm no different in that regard. Um, but, I think that just from a human standpoint, it can be hard to interact with a person, a book, a movie, etc. Doesn't matter what we're talking about, that is always negative, always tragic. And even the inverse is true, always happy, always optimistic. And that balance, I think, makes for a more interesting story, a more engaging story, and one that keeps you in it longer so that you can then experience whatever the goal of telling about the tragedy is, or experience the jokes and the humor side of it, whatever it may be. It That balance, I think, is necessary to create a better reader experience. Plus, I think in my personal case, I would struggle to write dark things if I couldn't be a little funny from time to time, because then I would just be sad, and sad is not good.
Becca, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, what a light question to start with. No, I think Morgan kind of hit the nail on the head, and I think about this a lot because I write for kids. So I'm working on my first book for adults, but all of my backlist is everything from upper elementary to teenagers, and I think we have a job when you write for kids or for anyone to like talk about things honestly. But I find that humor can usually hook people to get them in, and then you can talk about the hard things. Um, but also to Morgan's point, like I don't think I could write this stuff if I couldn't enjoy myself. I think I don't know. It's a lot of fun to have a character who can kind of be like the mouthpiece or like balance things because if it swings too far the other way, I get bored, and then I think people just put the book down.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think you all nailed it. Morgan's point about nobody wants to listen to you if everything's sad the whole time is a really good one. When I was teaching undergrads, I'd always tell them like you want to like imagine for an intro like you're on a bus and you want other people on the bus to listen to you, but they don't know who you are. And nobody cares about your tragedy when you're a stranger. But when you start making jokes, people want to listen, they want to hear more. And the only other thing I'd add is that in all of the saddest situations in my life, someone has always been there cracking jokes because I think it's very
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And I think when people get uncomfortable, they start cracking jokes. And so if you don't have that, you're not writing characters or situations that feel real.
Oh no, it's real hard not to listen to the person shouting on the bus. Just objectively.
But you're moving away. You're not
I am
engaging with
moving
them the
away,
way
but
they
they are hearable, and that's distracting.
distracting, but not you're not engaging with it with the way they want you to.
I am engaging in a manner called walking away. That's physical activity. My phone tells me I should do that.
Well, that
Absolutely.
begs the question. So, is there inappropriate? Is there a time when humor is inappropriate in a scene?
My mom told me that all the time. And she said, you can't be cracking jokes now. Like, Ryan brought up the idea of, a lot of the darkest times that he experienced, people were cracking jokes. And you'll see in movies, there's, I don't have a good movie example of this, but you'll see movies where people are at a funeral, a wake, whatever, for someone. And they are telling jokes and stories about this person's life and things that made them happy. And it's, on one hand, it's kind of counterintuitive because a funeral, a wake, is a somber moment. It's a somber event intended to memorialize the life of a deceased individual. But at the same point in time, you know, there's this balance that comes from the memory or memories of someone. And for many, what we remember a person for after they pass is that humor, is that that joy that they brought. And I think that because that's kind of such a natural thing to our experience as humans, it kind of makes that balance a very natural thing for us to do as storytellers.
Becca, do you have any opinions on where that balance is?
Yeah, I am forgetting every funny thing I've ever written, of course, which is not great because people do tell me that they're always surprised that my books are funny because they deal with I write fantasy, so there's a lot of people getting murdered, there's people getting their heads cut off. And I think that it all comes down to execution. So, like in my book that's out in the fall, one of the characters is a necromancer. So, like, it could be very heavy stuff, and he's my joke vehicle, right? Um, and I think when you're crafting a scene that's dealing with something heavy or grim, if the humor like punches down or it feels like you're not in the joke with the character, then it's going to feel inappropriate. But I think this idea of like laugh so you don't cry, you can use that so well with a character where when you see someone backed into a corner and then they're cracking jokes or they're like in a scene where like it's so like awkward that they can't help but like point out the obvious, it can pull the reader in. Now, I've also seen it executed really poorly. Like I think some franchises criticism because it'll be the like wink at the camera every 2 seconds and it treats the audience like they're stupid. So I think it's a really hard line to walk. Um, but it can be appropriate or inappropriate from like a sensitivity level, but also just from an execution level. And I think nothing makes something good better than well done humor, but nothing will ruin something than bad humor. Whether it's like mean or just like poorly done, where you'll just like put it down and be like, oh, no more. I can't do it.
I'm really glad you brought genre into it because I think different genres have different levels of this stuff. And like you can have like horror that's farce, 'cause I'm a horror writer, and you can have horror that's like an American Werewolf in London, where it's still scary, but there are laughs. And I think you need to consider as a writer, like, am I writing farce where like
Yes.
the narrative is the joke, and the jokes are in the narrative, or am I writing a situation where bad things are happening to people who happen to be funny people, and so they're the ones telling the jokes?
Yes. Yeah. Spot on. You said that so much better than me and so much faster.
Well, and I think that people are that are naturally funny are going to be funny when they're stressed, especially. Um, like that just seems like a natural reaction. You go to what you're most comfortable with, and that happens to be being funny.
I think you're right about that. Stephen King is very funny, and Grady Hendrix is very funny. He writes horror, but it's very funny. Those are not mutually exclusive things. They
No,
can coexist in the same world. You don't lose your personality just because you're in a scary situation.
I always think about how a lot of like comedians who are truly like very clever and really funny have had hard lives, whether it's like death or disease or drug addiction, and a lot of writers who will lead, like you find out that like they had some terrible thing happen. And I think there is a kind of absurdity in tragedy that you have no choice but to laugh. So, like, I won't give you guys my backstory, but I sustained a really bad traumatic brain injury when I was 24 that took away my ability to read and write. 2 weeks after Simon and Schuster offered on my debut novel, and I was like, cool, like, awesome. And it was so absurd. I remember making jokes about it. Like, I was like, okay, cool. I'm a writer that can't write because what else can you do? And I do find that like some of the funniest writers or actors or comedians that I know, you like learn about their life and I'm like, are you guys okay? Like, they're
no,
like, I'm in a lot of therapy. And I'm like, oh, you're deflecting. Okay.
therapy's been so useful as a writer.
Oh yeah.
And I'll just say that, like in the sense that Becca just said of like, yeah, you a lot of the funny writers, comedians, actors, actresses, they tend to be folks who've dealt with a lot, but like therapy, just in the ability to work through emotions, work through experiences, teaches so much as a writer in how to deliver emotion. That like,
Mhm.
um, here's your tip for being funny in writing: go to therapy. You'll learn about yourself and like, oh, yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to solve all your problems, but I am saying it will help you think through things better. It genuinely helps.
And also pay attention to what you make jokes about because I know that I'm real uncomfortable when I start putting on a comedy show in front of my therapist. Her name's Kelly, and she just like watches me, and I'm like, oh no, I'm getting nervous.
Yeah,
I'm making jokes about my mom.
there's a face my therapist makes it, and it's like, oh, I've stopped being funny, and you are concerned about me. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Wait, are you telling me your therapist doesn't laugh at all your jokes? My therapist is like the best audience for my jokes. I don't know if she's analyzing me while it's happening, but I don't stop because she's laughing. If someone's laughing, I just keep going.
It's clown hour that you pay for.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to pay people to laugh at my jokes and make my self esteem good. Like that, it's cheaper than buying an entire social media platform, is it not?
They say tragedy plus time equals comedy.
There you go.
And, and I'm going to misquote Mel Brooks here, but he said something like, tragedy is when I get a paper cut, and comedy is when you fall off a building and die.
It's when you fall into an open sewer and die, I think.
Could be,
That's the
could
quote.
be. That sounds better. Yeah. How do you think that fits into what we're talking about?
I don't walk near open sewers anymore. Like, common childhood joy of mine. Never again. Never will I meet a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Master Splinter, I miss you.
Do you
Um,
still eat pizza?
I plead whatever amendment I need to not to answer that. Let's go with the 21st.
Ryan, I'm curious of your perspective on this because you're a horror writer. So, like, I find that horror is typically delving into like the worst day of someone's life conceivable. And you're usually writing about someone else having a terrible time. So I like because fantasy is like I have the moments, but there's a different arc there. I don't know. I'm curious. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
If horror is like just the worst day of someone's life.
Not
Or
necessarily, but
yeah,
what she was saying were like tragedy is when I get a paper cut, humor is when you fall off a building and die because you're playing with other people's tragedy necessarily. Or maybe I'm wrong. You can
yeah.
tell me if I'm wrong.
I mean, well, you have to balance it. Like, and horror is like almost a catch-all in American like genres right now, where like everything with a magical element gets called horror. At least when it comes to film,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like. It's like, but like Friday the 13th movies, I think are like the laughing at someone else falling into the sewer grate and dying.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they have to really balance it because if those deaths ever feel like a tragedy, the Friday the 13th movies stop working. Like if there's a funeral after Jason killed someone, it would no longer be that kind of movie. Um, but yeah, I think there's just like it's just such a big genre that it's hard to say there's like one thing that it's doing in that regard. Actually, the stuff I'm doing is more monster as metaphor kind of horror, but I'm
Mm.
shooting for the tone of Ready or Not or An American Werewolf in London while
Oh,
I'm
okay.
doing the metaphorical stuff. And I would say that's like it's tend to be the worst couple of weeks of somebody's life. But I'm normally imagining the character as like some version of me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if any of you have seen Sinners, which is like
Oh, it's
just
great.
recently.
Not yet.
Yeah.
So good. And I think actually such a master class in like jump scare and then you laugh and then jump scare and like this I went and saw it with my friend last night and it was funny because there were times we were laughing out loud and then I was and it's not like I'm kind of a chicken, but it was like jump scare scary. So that's I can't do like the psychological stuff, but you'd be laughing and then I'd be like, good guide, what are you doing? And then it's they like guide you through those peaks and valleys of like you laugh and then you're freaking out. And it's like this pendulum that's so interesting. So
Yeah.
good if you haven't seen it. Oh,
You can get so much higher on the scare pendulum if you get somebody to laugh.
hmm
Because you need to be able to bring them down to go back up again. Because the up feels higher. Like a roller coaster is never just straight down. Or, I mean, King Ka was.
that,
And King Ka kind of sucks if you ever go on it. So you go like 80 miles an hour for a minute, and you're like, well, I drove 80 miles an hour on 95 to get here. But you need the ups and the downs for it to really land, in my opinion, at least.
yeah. I mean, I think that answers the earlier question of balancing it too, of like it's a beat dance, right? Of like it can't
Yeah.
just be all funny and all scary. It's this push and pull of like now you're off guard because I made you laugh. Look at this terrible thing. Oh, you're scared? Here's a joke. Like,
Well, and I think that that's why it works so well in the genres we write. We have a horror writer here, we have a fantasy writer, we have dystopia. Like, those are not exactly genres typically noted for being uplifting. Um, and I think that's why humor can work as well as it can within those specific genres because it does create those peaks and valleys much easier than a like a traditional Victorian romance or whatever. Like, not to say you can't have humor in those things, but it's a different kind of psychological movement.
yeah, no, that's such a good point. Some of the funniest things that I've read have walked that line of real or not real. And I think the closer you get to this absurdity of like dystopia or magic or whatever, the more you can play in that realm of like, okay, this is you're suspending your disbelief already, and I'm scaring you, so now I can make you laugh and tie you closer to it humanizes the characters in the world.
It does.
We don't want to be friends with somebody who has no sense of humor. And so if
Mm-mm.
we're going to invest 10 hours in reading a book, we don't want to spend 10 hours with somebody who has no sense of humor. And if we want to be invested in characters, we want them to feel real.
And I think the flip side of that is like I think we've all met people where I'm like, do you have anything in there? Because it's all so surface level polite where like they might make the right kind of jokes, but they can't talk about anything uncomfortable ever. And it's like you can't someone doesn't feel like a person to you if that's the case. If like I think and we have a real issue of that in American culture of like talking about illness
Mhm.
and death especially. And you hear from people when they lose a loved one where they're like, I just want you to talk to me about it. And like they'll make jokes or like when I had my brain injury, I would make jokes about it. So in the same way that like we don't want to be friends with the rain cloud, I think readers also, nothing will make them mad than the person who's just like, everything's great, it's a great day, and then there's nothing else there.
What's interesting about that is I think that part of what can make humor so effective, especially in darker things like what we've been talking about, is when it's expectation subversion.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a comedy, but as a darker comedy, just makes the point well. For those who've seen What We Do in the Shadows,
Oh, so good.
the entire premise of the Colin Robinson character is literally like you have everyone in this show is very traditional, dark, gothic, vampire. And then you have Colin Robinson, energy vampire, who is middle management corporate person and is by far the most soul-sucking character in the show. And it's because you are subverting it and using this very typical character that you'd see in any office comedy, in using that to subvert the expectations. It really allows, other jokes to hit well. It also allows the darker moments of that show to hit funnier. So like there's variance in comedy that creates that balance a little bit better. Like you guys were saying, one of the things that you absolutely don't want to be doing in your writing, in your comedy, is punching down. Like the only reason to write a character that's punching down is if you want to make them look like an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is why you do that, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah. Which can work depending on what you're trying to do. You have to know that that is going to be the reaction. And I see things fall flat or writers get confused when people like hate a character, and I'm like, well, they're mean, and not in like a way where I root for them. I just like kind of want them to get shot. Like,
Yeah, it's hard though to find like because you're like coming from your own specific worldview, and you're gonna find people with different worldviews who are gonna see these characters differently. I think as long as I'm getting a reaction of some kind from a character from people, I don't care if they love them or hate them. Like they're reacting to something. Something is on that page that's getting an emotion out of them.
Yeah, a character doesn't have to be liked to be enjoyed, I think, is a critical.
oh yeah.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, after
No.
you.
I was just gonna say I love my favorite kind of villain to write is the villains where readers are like, I have a point, or the villains that are like, I didn't do it, but I would have, and you're like, girl, can you just go get like a government job and focus this energy on something productive? Like,
See, and I write the polar opposite of that, whereas it's the protagonist side, but also B, it's like they are such a mess that like, no, please stop. Let other people do things for you. You are going to hurt yourself. And have. Like the both extremes of that can be very funny, and it causes people not just to enjoy the humor in them, but to root for the characters for different reasons. Like in your case, you're creating those villains that people love to hate. That you see this in pro wrestling a lot, where the wrestling heel ends up getting cheered more than they end up getting booed, and that's its own subgenre and its own circle when you look at those dynamics. But even so, like that's not when you traditionally think about what a villain is. It's not the oh hello please step on me that a lot of people expect when they see their villain now. Whereas because those villains can be so witty, so quick-witted in their responses, charming, comedic, the humor sets people off and it makes people like them even when they shouldn't. Or shouldn't based on, the character logic.
Remember when The Rock first became, when The Rock was a baby face, or was a heel, became a baby face. He didn't like do anything different. He was just really fucking funny and doing really bad stuff. But he was so funny that nobody, like, we're just gonna cheer this guy. He's too funny to boo.
We can make this a wrestling panel. I'm here for this.
I am moderating the wrestling panel at StokerCon in Stanford next month.
That
we should keep this a humor. Yeah, we should keep this a humor
One of my editing clients wrote a wrestling Phantom of the Opera crossover. It is the book I'm most excited that got picked up by an agent that I've ever seen.
Wrestling
Could you
Phantom of the
say the
Opera?
name?
I
Phantom.
don't know if the title's been announced yet, so no, I cannot.
Okay. I
But
would love to read that. Please message
I
that to me when it's
I
available for people
actively
to read
was
it.
I was actively like I messaged this person. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work with you because I was their mentor for a program. And I was like, yes, I will work with you, but before this, I need to spend 60 seconds fangirling about this because this is everything I want in a story.
So let's just talk for a minute, as I want to make sure we hit all the highlights this topic can get us. Um, I think a lot about humor as a vehicle for truth telling. Um, and so when we're striking that balance, sometimes when someone is telling you the truth, you can't hear it, but you can hear it if it's done in a funny way. And so let's talk about how that can be done in these tragic or horrific scenes. Who wants to start that one?
There's the
Not
great
me.
Shakespeare line,
Go ahead.
jesters do oft prove prophets from King Lear. I think
Mhm.
about that a lot. I don't have like any specific craft advice, but if you have a funny character, like Lori's saying, they can just say whatever you want them to say as long as it's in their voice and it's funny.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. When I was growing up, I got out of high school and I went to college and I wanted to work in sports radio. And there were two people I wanted to emulate. One, a very traditional sportscaster in the form of Stuart Scott, and the other, Stephen Colbert from the Colbert Report, back when he was on there. And the reason it was the combination of the two, Stuart Scott was very much the best at what he did. He passed away a few years ago, but he was arguably the best sportscaster, bar none, when he was alive and working. Colbert, what was intriguing about him, and you've seen this carried on not just with him, but with folks like John Oliver, Josh Johnson, other folks going forward, is that what they do in the political satire that they do is that they expose the absurdity and often cruelty of a situation, not just through humor, although that is very much a part of it. The work that they do is comedy at its core. But what they do to really show it is to pair it against a societal lens, to show it in such a way that not only do you see what is funny about the situation, but why that it's heartbreaking that we are at a point where we have to laugh at this. The whole idea of, you know, you have somebody who spends $40,000 to save a child from the orphan crushing machine when you have to wonder why we have an orphan crushing machine in the first place. That basic premise is what they're putting up and shining a light to. And I think that, to me, that was a very effective way to do things. And honestly, is a big reason why I write humor in my stories, because it's not just about funny characters. Yes, great, totally fine. But at the same point in time, it's a matter of, how do you tell the story in a way that's going to make people care about the actual problems you're trying to discuss in a way that isn't going to make them put the book down.
If people will listen to a joke before they'll listen to a lecture.
Usually.
Mm-hmm.
Always. I think you can play with the conventions of your genre in a scene too, in a way that will get readers, that will remind them of stakes and get them on your character's side, which is my favorite kind of humor to use in a book. So it's not just someone making a joke, but it's like nodding at conventions of whatever you're working in. So I have a scene in my middle grade where like the villain like has caught them, and like I'm aware that these are all 12-year-old heroes, right? And this is like an adult that is threatening them. And there's a scene where the characters are like, "Oh, so are you going to do your villain monologue now?" And he goes, "No, I'm just going to kill you." And my editor was like, I laughed out loud when I wrote this, but also this is so terrible. And I'm like, yeah, but we have to remind them like these are kids that are up against these adults. And like, I love hunting for situations like those. Like, there's a scene in I Killed the King when they confront the villain, and this one girl's like, I'm gonna go tell everyone. And he's like, you think I won't just push you out a window? And it's like that jarring reminder of the stakes and the danger your character is in. And when you can play with the surprise, and like in fantasy, there always is a villain monologue. So when you decide to like turn it on its head, it can make it feel fresh. But the trick is actually like, I'm getting you to laugh and reminding you like these 12-year-olds are in danger.
Kingsman does that so well
Mm-hmm.
with Samuel L. Jackson's monologue, and just in the middle just shoots the guy that's there. He's like, "Why am I monologuing? I solved the problem."
Mm-hmm. That's actually my frustration with a lot of media is I'm like, can someone just kill this guy? Like, can
Right?
we just please? Um,
Yes, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die, but not before I tell you a 434-page layout of my evil
mhm.
plan and why with bibliography.
Oh,
Which
and
again, you
Goldfinger.
can oh, go ahead.
Why is the laser aimed between his feet? Why not just aim the laser and shoot straight through him right at the beginning?
Mhm.
Drama!
Because it's right after that line. Hey, yeah, drama, obviously, but just Goldfinger should have done better.
He's Goldfinger, not Goldbrain.
One of the best scenes in Raiders of the Lost Ark is when, in the beginning, when in the market, when the guy's doing, all this stuff with the swords, and then Indy just goes,
And you
and he
just
hits
shoot
him.
him.
Have you
I'm
all
not going
seen the
through this
meme about
nonsense.
that? It's a
Yeah, I
meme,
know
so I
the
don't know if
story
it's
where he had
true.
the flu and he just couldn't be
Yeah.
bothered.
But apparently that guy spent like months training for this fight. And they said in this meme, so I don't know if it's true, that Indy shoots him, that he died for like 20 minutes on the first take because he was so angry that he'd done all this preparation just to get shot by Indiana Jones.
That's so funny.
Amazing.
You can't have something funny without the element of surprise. You don't expect that. You
Hmm.
expect this long, drawn out fight, and it 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 just subverts the convention so much.
I wish I knew who it was, but there was a comedian like years ago that explained he was like, all humor is surprising people. He's like, whether it's a nervous laugh or a delighted laugh, or you're in on the joke or whatever, he's like, it just is a constant dance of me trying to surprise you. Um, and I think that's the challenge of writing it, but also the joy is in every scene going like, okay, what are my readers expecting and how do I flip this on its head?
Mhm.
Which makes it fresh, which makes all the writing fresh, whether it's horror or dystopia or fantasy or romance or whatever it is. Because there has to be surprise and humor, it can't be cliche.
Mm-hmm. And that's where it fails, where I read things and I'm like, I can tell you're not funny. You're trying.
Or if it is cliche, it should only be done to set up something else.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
power in playing off of an audience's expectations of tropes. Like you create the to go back to Bond films for a second. You create the blonde bombshell Bond girl. That was hard to say. And then suddenly they are the brightest character in there, and they are only using their body to trick people because they know that it will make them dumb and make their lives easier. Like the subversion of it is what adds layers to it. And I think that there's a time for cliche, a time for things, but like it's like with anything else, it's about how you use stuff.
I think it's good if you satisfy the genre expectations once in a while, but I think it's got to be a dance, like you were saying earlier, where sometimes it ends up being a joke on the genre, sometimes it ends up being the biggest part of the genre, sometimes it ends up being just something totally out of left field. But I think you need that like a little bit of unpredictability for your story to really like explode, feel like a powder cake.
It has to make sense too.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
you can't just end a story in a shocking way for sake of ending a story in a shocking way. I mean, you can, but I don't know if people are going to like that always. Going back to the wrestling thing, finger poke of doom, most shocking way to end that. Did not go well.
No, it did not.
Well, I'm not sure that wrestling is necessarily the way I intended to go out on this, but
I
I
wanted to
think
be a pro wrestler as a little kid. That was bound to happen. Be talked about in some panel some year.
but it is definitely humorous. Um, I want to give each of you the opportunity to talk about your individual writing and tell us what you are currently writing. Maybe tell us how we can find you on social media. Brian, let's go ahead and start with you.
So my new book, Say Uncle, came out 2 weeks ago. As of the time of recording, I'm not sure when this is being released. It's the story of a 15-year-old boy growing up in Connecticut, and his uncle comes in and takes his bedroom, and Braden, the boy, sneaks back into his room to steal back his favorite nudie magazine, and finds his uncle has a black magic book hidden there. I'm super proud of this book. I hope people read it. And I also have a Patreon where I do weird horror comedy with music and performances. And I described it as like, I think you should leave with Tim Robinson meets the Twilight Zone. Those are the two big things that I got going right now.
And you have a website or social media where we can find you?
Yes, ryancbradley.com and at ryanb4890 on Blue Sky and Instagram.
Yeah, so I am always writing about 700 things at once, but the thing first on the docket is my next YA fantasy. Well, you can
That
kind of see it.
is.
Yeah, she's blipping in and out.
Yes.
I Killed the King, which I co-wrote with another author. It's out this September, and it is Knives Out with Magic. So it follows the story of 6 teenagers over the course of 12 hours when they're pulled into the king's chambers on the night of a historic war-ending ball. And he's like, I need you to protect me. And then he dies in front of them. And one of them did kill him. So it is like twisty murder mystery and dark. It also is the funniest thing that I've ever written, I think. It's been a delight to see people have a great time with it. Um, and then I have a middle grade duology starting next year. That's the Milo and the Monstrous Betwixt one, but people don't think that far out. So mostly just this one. And then you can unfortunately find me all over the internet. So my website is rebeccamix.com, but I never update it. So if you want to hear from me, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, it's just Mixbecca. And most of it is my constant war against all of the invasive plants in my garden, which I do try and talk about with humor, because if not, I'm going to have to fight whoever planted all of them.
So I've got 2 books out right now. First 2 books of the Aziz Realm series, which is dystopian sci-fi / people tell me it's actually secretly sapphic romance masquerading as dystopian sci-fi. That's for you to decide, not me. Kotov Syndrome's the original book of the series, Wood Pushers Book 2. I am working on Book 3, but it's nowhere close to ready yet. I have a novella that I'm trying to get out by the end of the year. That is a trans coming out story, and that will hopefully be out by end of year. We'll see. I am a editor, first and foremost before a writer. So I do editing for lots of folks. Jobbatplace.com is my editing business. And in terms of my social media presence and website as a writer, website is anotherindiewriter.com, and I'm only on Blue Sky, and it's anotherindiewriter.com is my username there as well.
Wonderful. Well, it has been wonderful talking to all of you. You have had some really interesting things to say, lots to think about. Thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for attending. We will be closing this event now. If you have more questions or want to discuss this further, feel free to chat within the Discord at Chat Lounge or ask the question in question box. And check out what events are coming up next on event announcements.